First of all, thank you so much for coming. Today, first I'm going to present myself. I'm Sandra, I'm from Ontario. I started paddling by mistake. When I moved from Europe to Canada about 8 years ago, and I was really down to backpacking, climbing, all that stuff, and I was want to do a traverse in Canoeing, and I just decided the only way to cross some sections, I need to rent a canoe. And I didn't know anything about paddling. And then it was luckily I crossed the lake and I found my trail, and I found canoeing for me. I really love it, and it's my future as a paddler. And luckily I met as well Gary Atman in another club, a ski club, and then Gary told me, "Oh, you need to join Wilderness Canoe Association," and that changed my life. I started paddling much more, and I started exploring a little bit about Canada. It's the best place to paddle. I started doing a lot of rivers, and then I was invited to belong to the Wilderness Canoe Association board. And yeah, and so far it's very good. And unfortunately, since last year with the COVID, we need to lock down everything. And I spend a lot of time browsing, trying to figure out the best place in Canada, small map with all the rivers I want to do in Canada. On Alberta was, that's interesting. Plus, it was a really small dog, very cute dog. And I started exploring, oh, that's a really nice dog. There's an excellent paddle. And I start chatting a little bit, sending some comments to Jim Olver and say, well, really cool. And we start sharing some feedback. And since the COVID, we start create some events, and I feel there's one guy I really want to bring. It's Jim Olver from Alberta. It's a very experienced paddle. It looks very good Canadian explorer, been everywhere, and it's the right fit to share his stories in all Canada. And thanks so much. And I think now it's all yours, Jim.
Well, thank you very much, Sandro. You're very gracious, and I'd like to thank you and Gary for being so welcoming today. And as we prepared a couple surprises for the group, and I've enjoyed putting this presentation together because I got to look at all my pictures, and it's hard just picking a few pictures. And so what I'd like to do is do a little share screen and tell a bit of a story and try to tempt you folks to come out and paddle in Albertan rivers. And here we go. So how does that look, fellas?
Looks great.
Good.
Okay. So I call this river canoeing in Alberta and beyond. I've had to sneak in a few places outside of Alberta as well. There we go. So I want to tell, I was born in Calgary, but I grew up in Guelph and Port Credit, so close to where many of you live. And I remember mother sent me for day school at the Mississauga Canoe Club, a week of school during the summer. And I remember them getting us in Voyageur canoes and C2s, and we'd paddle up the Credit River to the Queen Elizabeth Bridge and back down and up and down. And that's what got me started. And shortly after that, my father and my sister is here in the house tonight, so she'll remember this, bought us, the family, a canoe. And this is a picture of that canoe in the early 1960s. And I think I see Daphne at the far end of that dock right there. This is on Lake Erie, Featherstone Point, if you know it. And we paddle in the bay. And my cousins and I, we'd paddle out into the big waves. I remember going out into those big waves, smashing up and down and surfing them in. We were pretty tiny people back then. And I remember Uncle Sam and Dad fixing the fiberglass in the base of that canoe with the epoxy and stuff. So that's what got us started. And I wonder if that canoe is still hanging around the clan somewhere in Ontario. I also remember we had a lovely painting in our living room of the Elora Gorge. I don't think I've ever seen the Elora Gorge other than that painting. And apparently Dad would tell the story that as the painter was working, 3 kayaks went by and he included them in the picture as well. And so those are strong images I have of that. I was a junior forest ranger in Lake Nipigon, I think when we were 15 or 17. I forget the year, but that got me outside. And then I started an experience that took me into wilderness and led to my education. And at the end of grade 13, I worked in northern British Columbia in an asbestos mine. And that was a very exciting experience to get out in the mountains. And so when I went to university, I chose geology. It happened to be my worst mark in first year. And of course, I specialized in it and graduated from the University of Toronto in 1974 and joined a mining company, Caminco Limited. And for 10 years in total, including the university summer jobs, I traveled throughout northern Canada, the Canadian Shield in the winter times in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec, and then in the summer up in the Keewatin of Nunavut and way up into the Arctic islands. So I was very interested in the wilderness and outdoors, although the canoeing didn't continue at that point. There is the Kazan River, if any of you have heard that, not far from the Thelon River, and I've heard some folks talking about that. I've seen the Thelon from a helicopter. And here on the right, we've got pictures of northern Quebec in the Shield country. But I found after an 8-year career in the bush that it wasn't very appropriate for having a family. So I thought, I've got to change. And I went back to university. I went to the University of Western Ontario and got an MBA, graduated in 1983 and moved to Banff, Alberta. And so a retired or a repurposed geologist moving to a geological mecca. And here's a picture. I should ask, how many of you folks have been in maybe how many of you been in Alberta and been in Banff? If you could just type it into the chat, we'll make sure we don't all fall asleep here. Let's use that chat. Oh, Sandro has, very good. Anyone else been in Alberta? Isidore, excellent. Scott, worked at the Fairmont. Well, there's the Fairmont right at the right of that picture. And Chip Olver, my wife, Tom, yep, Kathy, Glenn, me too. Yes, so many of you have been here. Great, great. And I was hired by an organization called, you want to go? Yes, Eric, we'd like you to come too. Called Banff Center for Arts and Creativity. This is a world destination for artists. It also runs leadership seminars, and we host conferences, lots of conferences to help fund the scholarship fund there at the Banff Center. And I'm just completing my 38th year working there. I think I may be the only graduate of my MBA class who's still with the same employer after this long. But if you'll notice in this picture, the lovely river flowing right through, the Bow River, and it's got that lovely blue turquoisey color that comes from the rock flour that the glaciers grind off the mountains. And as the waters flow in the summertime, it makes its way into the Bow River and creates this beautiful color. Here I'm going to use this technology. I've got a laser pointer just below the pointer now. That's Bow Falls. This doesn't give justice to the falls, but there's the falls there. Taking a sharp left turn. Here's the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, and the world famous Banff Springs Golf Club just snakes right out between Tunnel Mountain and Mount Rundle. So I got into canoeing almost by accident. I bought this Grumman 17-foot with the 7 ribs to reinforce it for whitewater. Who's got a Grumman out there? If you do, please let me know in the chat. I see they're going for $1,500 on the resale pages, and it may be the time to pass this boat on to someone else. I was the third owner. The story was it had flown off a car at 70 miles an hour and is still very, very good. There's quite a few dents. I bought it for $500 back then. But it has this chosen place in the backyard right now. Then I met this man. His name is Jim Buckingham. This is Bucky here. He's one of the legends in the Rocky Mountains. He came from the Winnipeg Canoe Club, and he, in 1975, started a river canoeing course. And in the mid 80s, I took the course, and he taught us, checked out our strokes on flat water, forward, backward, prise, draws, braces. And then that first day, we're right into the Bow River, forward ferries. Eddy turns came shortly after, in and out of eddies. Reverse ferries eventually, and over a 4-day period, developed some pretty good skills and ended up in the Lake Louise Rapids, Class 3 Rapids for the final day. And I thought, wow, just like you, Sandro, I found what I wanted to do. But that was it. The 2 weekends were over, and I didn't paddle again until the next year. And I joined them again and again. I think I took that course 10 times. And then here you can see these shots are on the Bow River. You can see the magnificent mountains there, and the close cliffs. These are glacial debris that are all through the valleys here, as the glaciers receded for the last time about 12,000 years ago. That laid the fabric which the rivers have been eroding ever since. But here we've got some eddy turns going on here, and there's Bucky giving a lecture on the right. Throughout the courses, we dumped a lot. And, the challenge with mountain rivers is they just keep moving. They don't drop and pool. They just keep moving. And we all quickly learned how to dump. Well, you don't learn, you just dump. And over time, we learned to start rescuing people. And other than the 4 instructors for the course, there would be 4 or 6 or 8 rescue persons. So 2 to 4 boats, and they would be part of the instructional complement, and they were there to help people out when they dumped. And we wanted people to dump to get used to going into the frigid cold water, having that just shocking experience where you thought life was going to end, but then 5-10 seconds later, you develop an ability to deal with it. And so I became a rescue boater and probably spent another 10 years spending those 2 weekends a year rescuing people. And in the end, got a lot of experience rescuing. And we do a lot of rope throwing. There, the top right picture, you see Kim throwing a lovely little rope. I think there was another canoe just a little further downriver. Tea rescues are quite common in our strategy for rescuing. And there's a picture of a graduating class at the bottom. Over the 45-year history, we've trained over about 1,500 paddlers. And I have been, I got certified about 15 years ago and am one of the key instructors as well. So now I'd like to introduce my wife, and she's amongst you right now. Her name is Chip. She came from Hamilton, and here she is in the front seat on one of our mountain rivers, and she looks pretty happy. And I'm just so lucky that as a pair, we're doing something that we really love together. And there she is. And our little dog that Sandro referred to is just hiding behind Chip's right elbow, but you'll meet her in a couple minutes. And I'll talk about how I get these pictures a little later in the presentation. But we want to talk about rivers of Western Canada. And I think, this might be a pretty good point, Sandro, for us to try one of those polls. We've got a poll to test you folks out on. So would you take over and do that, please, Sandro? All right. If you have your polls there, everybody's getting right into it. We've got a skillful group. 18 per, wow.
Oh.
We've got some real legends in this group, eh? The majority, over 20 years of paddling. Good for you. Do we have another poll? What's your favorite type of canoeing? Solo, tandem, tripping, repair building, whitewater? They're getting into it. Canoe tripping's out to an early lead. Whoa. Solo, nobody's into tandem? I find it fascinating when I see the people paddling in Britain that they're really into solo paddling. Okay. Thank you for that. I think we've got another. Lots. Do we have another poll? How many days this season do you paddle? Wow, it looks like 10 to 30. One person over 50. Is that you, Chip, that voted for that one?
Yes, it was.
Well, we're blessed to live amongst rivers, but we paddle for between 50 and 70 days a year. And I think we've got one more poll. Thank you very much, Sandro. Planning to join soon. Good one. Nice. Well, thank you for taking part in that poll. We're doing it in part to test our ability to do polls because we want to make these sessions as interactive as possible and to gain some interesting information for both you folks and for us. So Sandro, thank you very much for doing that. So I'm going to continue now with the presentation. Here's Western Canada. I'm going to use my laser pointer again, and I hope you can see this line here. Here's the line of the Canadian Shield. And you folks are blessed with the Canadian Shield in Ontario, and the boundary waters in the United States is an extension of that. But from Banff, the Canadian Shield is a long way, and we will talk about that in a little while. Chip and I go up here in the summers to paddle, and I'll talk about that in a little while. Here's the prairies, and then we've got the Western Canadian Cordillera, the Rocky Mountains, and it sure stands out on the map. Here's a little bit closer. We're zeroing in on Calgary. Banff is about 130 kilometers from Calgary. High speed, beautiful highway. You can it's the Trans-Canada Highway. And I hope you can really see the delineation of the mountains. These are ancient seabeds that have been piled up almost 2 miles or 3,000 meters in the air as tectonic plates collided on the west coast. They started to rise about 120 million years ago and stopped rising about 60 million years ago. And we paddle in rivers that go between these parallel ranges, and sometimes they cut across the ranges, which is always exciting because there's bedrock. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Here, a little bit closer, we've got Banff, and we've got Lake Louise. Many of you have heard of that. That's about 57 kilometers from Banff. And a lot of our paddling is day paddles, and we'll paddle or drive up to an hour to get there. And let's get to the first one. So when you come to Alberta, what you should do first is get one of these Alberta guides, Mark's Guide for Alberta paddlers. And he's a legend in Alberta, and it's just a wonderful collection of trip information. And we've got 2 copies, one in the car always and one at home in Alberta. And I'm sure where you live as well, we get digital readouts on all our major rivers. And so having that app on your phone is a wonderful thing. And at least you know what kind of flows you're looking out at. And I just did a copy of the flow today at the Bow River. And we don't look at the red, the water level. We look at the flow rates. And here is one season. And so you can see the upper and lower boundaries of the average flow rates on the river. And at the base on the left of the blue area, you can see the actual flows. And we've gone from 10 cubic meters per second almost up to 20. And by the middle of June, that'll be up to 160. And the big floods we had in 2013, we got over 300. So this is excellent information for us. We don't have to go down to the river to look anymore. We can see any river in the province. And planning is so important for keeping us safe. So the first paddle I want to show you is, we call it around the golf course. Here's Banff. Chip and I live right about here. This is where I work at Banff Center. Banff Springs Hotel is right here. Bow Falls, perhaps you can see the rapids there, right there. And so this is the golf course. You can see the fairway streaking out here. And there is a road that goes right past the golf course, swings around here, and comes back here. So we have road access, and we paddle this green line. It takes, in a good flow, we could probably do it in 40 minutes. We always take a lunch or a snack and make a day of, not a day, but it's about a 3 to 4 hour paddle door to door. And I've got a few pictures. Here's Bow Falls at a very low level. In fact, this was last weekend. And there's Lacey, our Puggle. And on the right, some of our buddies. The benefit of running a course and being a part of a river canoeing course for 30, 35 years is you make a lot of friends who have paddling skills. And we have a cohort of maybe about 40 people that we can send a quick text out and get a real a treat that we have here. And there's the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel. And here is just past the golf course, but another view of one of these big mountains, Mount Cascade, lots of snow in it. And then at the base, this was taken a couple of weeks ago as well. At the base, you can see the glacial sediments that are quickly eroding. You can see the talus slopes building at the base of it. And it always makes it good for pictures. And the beautiful thing about this paddle, and we take guests out a lot, is within 5 minutes of launching, you're in wilderness. It looks wilderness. You don't hear a highway. You don't see any signs of anyone. And it's so accessible for us. There's Mount Rundle. If we paddle right to the base of that, we could turn left, and in 3 hours, we'd be in Canmore. And that would be a second paddle that we would do frequently. Now, one of the big hazards for paddling here in the mountains, the first is it's cold water, and hypothermia is a real issue if we get wet. The other is wood. There's a lot of glacial sediments. The outside of turns, the sediments get eroded, the trees fall in, we get sweepers, we get strainers, we get log jams, and we spend a lot of time staying away from the outsides of the turns. And here's one. This was a famous one. A lot of, maybe not a lot, but many people paddle in the Rockies not knowing how to paddle. And we frequently find wrecks. We frequently find gear, paddles, PFDs, coolers with beer, all kinds of things. Every trip we go out, we'll find something. And this one wreck, we found a couple paddles and went back a week later. We found a dry bag. A couple weeks later, we found something else. And there was this, what looked like a throw bag wrapped around one of these trees, the tree that my boat is behind. And the rope was going down into the water, and it wasn't slack, it was taut. And we watched that for months, but it was a dangerous corner, and we just let it go. And then around Thanksgiving, we ventured over there, and look what came out from under that tree. And that was a pretty exciting day when we pulled that one out. Recognize it, Linda? Now,
right now.
Yeah, it's in her backyard right now. Here is another set of trips. Here's Banff, get you oriented. Lake Louise, the border of Alberta and British Columbia is the Continental Divide. And I'm just going to draw it roughly here. It goes right down here. And so everything to the right, the red line, the yellow line, that all drains east and heads to Hudson Bay and the North Atlantic. From the red line left, it goes to the Pacific. We do a lot of paddling in the Bow River, and there's probably about 5 or 6 stretches that we'll do, depending on, we'll choose the stretch depending on the skill level of the individuals or the amount of time we have. And I'd like to show you some of those now. Here is starting right at a glacier, the one on the right, this is called Bath Creek. This is the famous Kicking Horse Pass that the Canadian Pacific Railway conquered the Rockies by driving the train through this pass. The highway is there too. It's braided streams at the start, comes off a glacier, so there's lots of glacial flour in the river. It's very shallow, and we spend a lot of time trying to choose which channel to choose. And then sometimes we just have to run ashore, drag the boats over, and find a better channel. Then we have a little run called Bath Creek Rapids, right down towards the Bow River. Here's Chip and Lacey and I going down there. And you're getting a little hint of how I take these pictures. You can see my broken hockey stick. And I've got a GoPro mounted on the end of it. I've got it clamped to the gunnels. And I point it at Chip, and I try to take her through the big waves so we get some splashes. Some days she says, no splashes today. Here on the left, we've got Bath Creek coming into the Bow River. The Bow River is not particularly wide at this point, but there's some wonderful technical stretches that we run. And here on the right, you can see us coming down through that little set of rapids. And I think the GoPro is very clear in that picture. Here, getting down closer to Lake Louise, our friend Brian in a solo there, Sandro, that's an Esquif Vertigue. And he's headed for Temple Mountain, Mount Temple. And there's a lovely glacier hanging off at the north side, of course. There's Temple Glacier. On the right, I just included this so you see some of our gear. You know, some of us have float bags, some of us have styrofoam pockets at the end. We're dressed for cold weather there. And here is a picture of the Bow River further up, closer to the source. And you can see the beautiful mountain scenery. Here's Mount Temple again, but we're about 6-7 miles away from it here, and there's the glacier. And you can see all of the trees that are in the river. That's our big danger. Now, if we go over, I'm just going to whip back real quickly. Here in British Columbia, we go on the Kicking Horse River, and this is very close to the source. It is fed by these glaciers up in these mountains here. You can see the beautiful blue in these lakes from the glacial flower. And so we go into the Kicking Horse, and it has a big broad valley. There's also braided streams in it. It's a lot, it's more remote than the Bow Valley, so we do enjoy being in the more wilderness setting in this river. There you can see the rock flower in the water. It's very shallow, but you can't see that it's 3 or 6 inches deep. The paddles take a beating there. Great places for lunch, and here's some of our buddies. And this was a famous day that I led them down the river, and I stayed close to the inside of the turn. But if you lead canoe groups, you find that they don't always keep the same line that you do. And the people after me didn't make the line, and they went through this lovely hole. And luckily I'd gotten to shore and had the camera ready, and we've got some famous pictures of them emerging from this hole. So now I'd like to go a little south of Banff. Again, here's Banff. Here's the edge of the mountains. And we're going to cross over into British Columbia at Castle Mountain and go down the Vermilion River. This is in Kootenay National Park. And it's much more wilderness than either the Bow Valley or the Kicking Horse Valley. So we're going to follow this green line for a trip. And here it is. Look at all the wood in the river. And on an average trip there, we would have to stop and portage 3, 4, 5 times. But it's a beautiful river. Different part of the Rocky Mountains. The cliffs aren't as significant. There's a lot more erosion. They're older, but beautiful valleys. One of our favorite places to go with experienced paddlers is called the Hector Gorge. And these are our friends going through the gorge. Once we exit the ridges of mountains, we get into the next valley, and it becomes wide, more deciduous trees. This is a fall day. And now I'd like to take you outside the mountains to a spot that we like for the early season and the late season because it's controlled by hydro dams. It's called the Kananaskis River, and it's part of an electrical generation project, but the electrical company has an association with Alberta Whitewater Association, and because the river pulses flow, it's not good for fish. And so they shut the river off, and they get big earth moving equipment into the bed of the river, and they sculpt the river for paddling features. And we have a very aggressive race course there for kayaks and solo paddlers, and then a less aggressive part that we go on in our tandem boats. We're always guaranteed good flow. And in the spring, it flows almost 24 hours a day. But in the very early spring, it will flow for 2 or 3 hours. And so you've got to look to see when it's flowing and catch it when you can. So here's obviously early season, and it looks like we're skiing down. You know, the biggest risk this day was to get down the hill without falling. It's got a lot of canoe training happens here. And here we are going in and out of eddies. They're all manufactured, and it's just a delight to use it. And here's my daughter, Linda, and we're surfing, some lovely surfing waves there. And there's our dog, Lacey. For some reason, when we surf, she turns backwards and faces me. I can't figure it out because I'd like to get the pictures the other way. But maybe it's the tilt of the boat that creates that. And then as we get down closer to the Trans-Canada Highway, you see the mountains again. And are there any geologists in the group? If you are, identify yourself in the chat. This is a very, very famous thrust fault. It's called the McConnell Fault. Geologists get very excited seeing that. I don't see anybody signing up for that in this group. So now let's talk a little bit about rivers coming out of the mountains. And I'm going to show you pictures from the Sheep River, the Highwood rivers, but they keep going south. The Elbow, the Old Man, the Crow's Nest, the Castle. You know, it's the snow draining out of the rivers to the east. And these are best captured in the springtime when they flow. Once the snow melts, you don't get much flow in these rivers. If there isn't a glacier feeding the river, they don't last very long. So here is the Sheep River, and it's more of a steep ravine, and you've got to time it right for the flow. If there's not enough water, you're just dragging all the way. And if there's too much, it's absolutely dangerous. And so here we like to get about a 17 CMS for this one. And you can see how it pops up quickly and it goes down quickly. So you've got to really time it, especially if your buddies are working and you've got to get an available day to go at it. And where we put in, this is the access through a tunnel. It's kind of a interesting way to get into a river under a road. Here's another interesting way to get into the river, the Highwood River. As you can see, a lot of the river has carved these pathways and created the big cliffs. And here's Chip, my wife, coming down, belaying herself down to the river. The marker in the guidebook said, go to the corral with the big bull, and don't go through the field with the bull, go around the field and down the rope. And previous paddlers have left these ropes for us to get down. Now, Chip had a new hip not that long before this trip, and I was really proud of her coming down that rope. This one is the Highwood River. But just spectacular ravines. And this is a geologist's dream to see rock like this. I like paddling. We take a lot of pictures when we paddle. I always have an iPhone in my upper pocket, and the GoPro is always going. And I always like it when my buddies have cameras too, and then you get a picture of yourself. Here, I remember this exactly. We had to bite the bullet and cut through a line of rocks, and I wasn't sure we were going to get through, but we did brace ourselves enough, and the dog was in a full brace there too. There's our friend Earl going around. He likes going first. And here, Chip and I walked around this one. It was a rainy day, really slippery rocks, but we got down below and we're all taking pictures of this. Our friends going through here. Okay, now I'd like to show you a different type of river in Alberta. It's called the Milk River. It's out in the plains and it's at the south edge of the province, right up against the United States border. And it is really a part of an irrigation project. The water is sourced out of Montana, flows into Alberta. It serves a lot of agriculture and then goes back into Montana and heads down to the Missouri and the Mississippi. So this is the third watershed we've shown you, heading south. It's part of the prairies where there's very few trees. And the first night we spent at a campground, it's about a 4.5 hour drive to this place. Stop at the campground. We learned a big lesson here on one of our trips. We broke camp in the morning. Breakfast was being made. It's a windy spot as well. And I undid the tent and I was drying it. I turned it upside down and it was drying it. And as we ate our breakfast, we watched our tent roll right across and into the river and it quickly submerged. My buddy and I took a wild run, got a boat in, and we got the canoe. We snapped a couple poles, but we were able to put it together that night. Beautiful countryside, lots of erosion on the rocks, sandstones here. This is a campground halfway down. It's called Poverty Rock. No cell service in the valley, but up on the tops, there's agriculture. So it's not that we're way out of touch, but you feel in wilderness down there. And then the next day, it leads us to a very impressive indigenous area with pictographs, and it's called Writing on Stone Provincial Park, and we camp in the Writing on Stone. And I should say, I should have said this earlier, I'm speaking from Treaty 7. Treaty 7 was signed in 1879 by Queen Victoria, and it's the traditional home of the Stoney Nakoda, the Tsuut'ina, the Métis, and the Blackfoot. And we live here and we co-shepherd the mountains and this land with those tribes. But this is a very important indigenous area. Rattlesnakes as well. And every time we go there, we know where they are and we go and visit them from a distance. A lot of undercutting on the outside of turns. And here's Chip and I just trying to keep our distance from that cliff. Now we'll travel 100 kilometers for paddles. For a 3-day weekend, we'll maybe drive for 4.5 hours. But for our summer vacations, we will go into the Shield. We drive to Saskatchewan, about 16 hours. We've also driven into the Barons River and flown out of Bissett, not too far from those Ontario rivers that you folks plan. And this canoe tripping is what we really love to do. And Mississippi is a great jump off spot there. The Churchill River Outfitters, Rick Dreisinger, runs a real steady business there. There's got twin otters, turbo otters, beavers to fly you into the wilderness. And Chip and I, with our friends, have done both the Yellow Paul River and the Orange Wapaskow Reindeer Churchill River twice each. And I just wanted to show you some of those images. It requires planes. Well, it doesn't. There are a number of ways that you can get dropped off by an outfitter or just do a normal car shuttle. That we always go the exciting route of hiring a plane, and it's that wonderful regular activity of breaking camp, having your meal, paddling, finding a campsite, pitching camp. We just love it. And portaging too. There's Jim Buckingham portaging. And some of you know about nesting canoes, but if you haven't known about nesting canoes, it took me a long time to realize that when you go in an airplane, if you can nest canoes, you could put 6 paddlers into this plane rather than 4 paddlers. And that reduces your cost big time. And I see that I'm just, the first time I looked in the chat, no, there's a ready business of flying in planes, both in Manitoba and in Saskatchewan. And I think the planes have to be registered to do it. And they have a special license. But I know we got worried about that a few years ago, but we've never had a problem. And if you nest it like this, you know, every time you nest, you're saving $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, and quickly pays for some canoes. And it brings the whole food preparation, dehydration, and here Jim Buckingham is showing off his reflector oven. Here's Chip and I just below Tuck Falls on the Paul River. Great fishing. There's another of the same falls. And here's a picture of our canoe. I know some of you will want to see the gear. We travel with 2 60-liter barrels, each one with a harness. We have these mech 115-liter and the one size down for our soft stuff, but we never trust them to be waterproof. We always double wrap our stuff waterproof within them. And then Chip has a smaller plastic bag that sits in front of her. And there you can see the padding on the seats. We take those off at night and we use them for kneeling pads at our tent. Weather. We seem to always get weather and rain. It's not unusual to get it, but it usually blows through pretty quickly. We've never really got whacked by it. But I have learned you get your rain gear on, tops and bottoms, before the rain comes, not after it comes. Here's a portaging picture, Steep Hill Rapids on the Reindeer River, and you can see the skidway. It was quite a long portage, but people had built a skidway. I don't think so much for canoes, but for aluminum boats. So outfitters could get boats in. And this is how we portage. I wear a barrel on my back and I balance one of the plastic bags on top. I usually take 3 trips, two trips just like that, and then 1 trip for the boat. And I've learned about sailing canoes, and it's a lot of fun. It's a real team building activity for people. And I look forward to the next opportunity. You can see those canoes just loaded right down. It got to be a problem when you get so much speed, the water splashes up between the parallel bows and starts to fill the boats up. Here's a nice campsite not far from Mississippi. It's kind of 2-level. We tarp our tents everywhere we go. I think I do it partly for something to do, and it's quite a sense of accomplishment. And I really don't want to have wet sleeping bags, so we're always tarping. there's the last portage we did. It was 2 kilometers of real mud and water. So portages aren't always fun, but it sure breaks up a trip. And as long as you don't get too tense while you're doing the portage, I think it's a nice activity. Pelicans, I hadn't seen pelicans before we got to northern Saskatchewan, and we see them in Manitoba as well, sandhill cranes. Now, another one, and this one I'm going down to the States in Utah. Has anyone been on the Green River or the Colorado River in Utah? A lot of people from Banff go to Moab in Utah, both for summer and for climbing, mountain biking, and canoeing. And I put this picture in so you saw our gear. This is just for Chip and I. And there's those 3 plastic bags I referred to, the 2 barrels, and we also carried 120 liters of fresh water with us in 19-liter containers. And you know, we're used to filtering water. The platypus is our filtration system, although they sure don't work well when you have glacial rivers with the silt. But this river, Green River, is very dirty. There's chemicals in it, there's animals in it, and we just didn't want to deal with water, so we took it all with us. And this is the type of country you're going through. It's easy paddling, it's really a float. And it was hot. We went end of April, the hottest I'd ever been. It was 90 degrees plus every day. And those rock canyons, they heat up and they've got heat all night long. But some just spectacular views. Now, look at this put in. This is a switchback down the mountain into the Green River. And it's hard to see, but the river's way down at the base there. I think it was 900 vertical feet. We had an outfitter take us there. And Chip was recovering from another hip surgery here. She had to go in the van. The rest of us, we all walked down. That was quite something going down. And here was the shuttle vehicle taking us back. It picked us up on the Colorado River just before it got really exciting. And that boat took 16, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 14 canoes. There were 28 of us. It was a jet boat, and it was a beautiful 2-hour ride upriver back to Moab. Really a lovely trip. Now, just a couple more things. I noticed that photography was one of the things mentioned on the Wilderness Canoe Association website, so I wanted to show you my gear. There's the GoPro 3. Got it 6 years ago. It just keeps taking pictures. And I don't take movies, I take time lapse. And if it's calm water, I'll take a shot every 5 seconds. And if it's fast water, I'll take it every half seconds. And I'll come home with 3 to 5,000 shots, flashes. And that's how I get these types of shots. The one on the right, it looks like we're filling right up with water. We did have to go right to shore to bail. The one on the left, I was filling up with water. And you know, you wouldn't get this type of a picture unless you had the camera there. And you see the dog just poking out down below. She's still in denial. She says, "Dad, you're not going to put me in again." And we put her in, and I put her in. I was solo this trip. She beat me to shore. I self-rescued from this, and it was cold. Here's some others. Often when you got the GoPro, I think the real benefit is when it's close to people's faces and you can see the expressions. And we'll often go down the river in tandem, like these two pictures, knowing that the camera's on. And there, I love it when Chip is laughing. The dog got really soaked a few times, and now the dog can read the rapids. She knows when the bad waves are coming, and she tucks in behind Chip, and Chip gets soaked, and then she pops back out. Now, GoPro accidents. These are the shots that you get when you're not even trying. And here we are in the Kananaskis River. We've just come through a real tricky place, and we're leading, and we're getting ready if anyone behind us has a problem. And the boat behind us dumped in this hole. And Kim and I were all ready to, we're throwing bags. And so this was an accidental shot. And it looks like Spider-Man shooting a web out of their suit. We both hit the swimmers. There, Bob's still holding his paddle. They both still have their paddles. That's the thing about having expensive paddles. You hold on. And I quickly handed my rope to Kim. She pendulumed them in to the right-hand shore, and I hopped in the boat and we went after the sunken boat. Everyone was fine. Now here, we're with Karen on the Vermilion River. She'd filled up with water. We were shaking the water out of her boat, and this GoPro took this beautiful picture of our downriver colleagues with the mountains in the background. I just love these flukes that happen. And here is another rescue operation. This was at the Hector Gorge. Two people in a boat just filled right up, and they were both separated from the boat. We made so many mistakes in this rescue, and you good rescuers there, you can see our problem. The water is going from left to right. We're good bag throwers, and we got our swimmers. But what's going to happen as those ropes tighten up? It just dragged us right into the boats. You've got to have a run out path to do a good bag rescue. We lost both bags. Kim ended up fully submerged at the end of the boat before she let go. I let go earlier, and we chased them down with the boats. So there is a bit of my story. And just before I ask for questions, I've been paddling a lot, and at my job with COVID, I'm a director of guest service at a conference facility. We haven't had a conference in 14 months. And my role has been to investigate virtual programming. And so I've been experiencing some of the most interactive virtual programming in the world right now. And there's been huge innovation over the last year. And I thought, wow, could I bring together canoeing and virtual programming? And I've launched with my colleague, Devin Ingram, something called Canoeing Live. And we offer a 90-minute show every 2 weeks. It's on a Sunday night. And I welcome you to join Canoeing Live. It's free. And all you have to do is get on a browser, type in Canoeing Live, and we'll pop up and subscribe. And you'll be able to enjoy our venture into virtual programming. I want to thank you for being so attentive tonight, and perhaps there are some questions in the group.
Well, Jim, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's amazing to see so many rivers in Alberta. I really like that one from the Kootenay side. It's beautiful river. It looks amazing. I will check.
We'll take you there when you come to to visit Sandro.
Yeah.
And I hope many of you do come to Alberta. We certainly would offer our guidance as in the planning stages. And if it worked out schedule wise, we'd love to spend a bit of time on the river with you.
I appreciate.
Excellent. Jim,
Yes.
I have a question for you. I live in southern New Hampshire in the United States, but I have a big map of Canada, and I see at the very north part of your province a place called Wood Buffalo National Park. Are there some good canoe trips in that park, or have you been there? Or
Eric, I have not been in Wood Buffalo. And I don't hear it talked about, but let me check Mark's guide. If you'd put your email address into the chat and Wood Buffalo, I'll report to you on what's up there.
all right, I
Hey, Jim.
appreciate it.
Yes.
This is Chip speaking. Isn't that where the Clearwater goes into? Brad and Kim have been on that. It goes right into Fort McMurray.
I'm not sure, but I'd like to find out about it.
And also, Jim, where's the Paul River in Saskatchewan? I can't find it on the map.
It's
So-
Paull is
Okay.
the spelling, Paull, and it's one of the feeder rivers into the Churchill.
Okay,
The Churchill is a major east-west, it's going east river, and there's many tributaries and many routes. Paull.
okay, all right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Eric. Thanks.
All right, start checking.
Yeah, you've got it.
Oh,
Good.
yes.
Nice.
I think it's the first one, 2007. Is that the first version? It says the other one. I think they must be the same. Almost.
I think they're very similar.
Yeah. I think there's some questions for one boat you have. I remember Isadora was asking about the boat.
While you're looking for that, I see Ken asking, are campsites readily available on these rivers? In the national parks, which are most of the rivers close to us, no, there aren't. The park doesn't let you do that. Up in the Shield area in northern Saskatchewan and Manitoba, it's a big challenge finding campsites. It's not that you don't find them, but you think with 6 people, you got to decide, oh yeah, I'd like that campsite, but you can't go back up river to a past one. It's always a little bit of a character building experience for groups choosing the campsite. You're usually tired in the afternoon, and I always find that an hour after you've started pitching camp, they look a lot better than they did when you first saw them. So yeah, it's part of the adventure.
So do you need to book all the campsites? Because
No.
I know it's a park.
No, these things, the only campsites you'd have to choose would be Writing on Stone Provincial Park.
Well, I just want to know. Well, I was last actually can think I watch. I'm pretty sure I'm going to watch this Sunday as well.
Oh, good.
It was a great job. Yeah, I think everyone should check Canoeing Live website, make a registration for Sunday workshop or event.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. I see Eric asked about no Duluth packs. It's interesting how we grow up in this little small community of paddlers, and we learn from what they do. And I haven't seen Duluth packs. We really go with barrels and those plastic bags, and it's maybe because we haven't had the experience.
I went to a camp in northern Minnesota, and that's all they use was Duluth packs. And my brothers went on some extensive canoe trips up in northern Canada, and that's all they use, the Duluth packs. So but I'm willing to give barrels a try because they make deter the bears. They can rip into a Duluth pack pretty easily, but maybe a barrel would be a good idea for bear country.
We are in bear country.
Mhm.
We've never had a problem with a bear.
Wow.
We once in a while will see them as we're paddling, but we've never had an encounter in camping. We separate our food from our camp, but we never hang it in trees. We just move it a little bit away. But bears can get through those barrels, but the beauty about the barrels are they're waterproof. And I find those plastic bags are not guaranteed waterproof. And usually when they leak, it's when they're laying in the bottom of the boat and you just build up water in the bottom of the boat for some reason, and they find their way through those creases.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do the same. Normally we use the barrels for food and 150 liters seal line bags for all the gear, all the tents and
Okay.
sleeping bags. That's
Yeah.
our typical.
Scott asked how long a trip was that? When we go, we're usually on the river about 12 days. We try to get 2 weeks off work, and then there's usually 2 or 3 days of travel involved.
There was a comment from Robert James about the dual pontoons with 2 canoes, and he was saying in Quebec, generally they don't go for that license because it's kind of against them. They really want to have more flights for money, you know.
I can understand that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know when I went to the Snake about 5 years ago, we had 3 canoes. 2 nested and 1 on the other float. So that was about 5 years ago. But I know in that time frame they were talking about it was outlawed, but you know, there's a way around it now, I guess.
Yeah, we've never had problems in Manitoba or Saskatchewan.
And on the eastern side of the province, all the big rivers, the Athabasca, the Saskatchewan, I mean, those are almost, I guess, historical commercial rivers. Are they, for that reason, sort of uninteresting for trippers, or are there trippers who use those rivers too?
I think there's trippers that do it. I think we just haven't had experience with it. And yeah, there's the South Saskatchewan, there's the North Saskatchewan, Athabasca. We had a young fella from Canmore. He paddled from Canmore to Missinippi. You know, that's the 16-hour drive, and he worked for the outfitter up there. He had adventurers as parents, and
When will you guys open the season in the Bow River in January?
well, we tried to get out. We've been out for about a month out canoeing, but the water's so low, it's very clear. We just take solo boats out so we don't scratch too much, but it's just so nice to get out after a long winter. The flood usually comes this middle of May through to the middle of June, and it's always exciting to get out in the big water. And it goes through till mid-October. We paddle.
Oh, it's a long season. That class 2, class 3?
You can find that. Well, we can always go to the Kananaskis River, where you're guaranteed class 3 on the upper Kananaskis. You just have to hit it when the dam is open.
Okay. Yeah, I think we are done. I think because we are going overtime. Right? Yeah, we can't stay all night. Jim, thank you so much for this presentation. It was really nice.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'm so pleased to have my sister on the call, and my daughter, and my wife. And may I remind you folks, if you're not into this, save the chat.